Good evening and welcome to the Audit and Standards Committee meeting of Melton Borough Council. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio-visual system this evening and the meeting will be streamed live on YouTube. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate they wish to speak and to use their microphones when speaking for the benefit of all present. The microphone is live when the red light displays. Please switch mobile phones to silent. I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the car park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. I am Councillor Don Pritchett, the Chairman of the Audit and Standards Committee, and can confirm we have the following Melton Borough Council officers in attendance tonight. The Director of Corporate Services, Dawn Garton, to my left. Senior Benefits Officer, Richard Peters. Senior Democratic Services Officer, Adam Green. Democratic Services Officer, Carol Tedds. And at my suggestion, I have agreed for the following officers to join via remote link. The Chief Internal Auditor, Rachel Ashley Corn, and the Monitoring Officer, Kieran Stockley. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. We've received no apologies for absence. Does anybody have any? Has anybody received any?
No, other than I knew Councillor Wood was ill last week and didn't attend a meeting. I'm just assuming that that's the same reason tonight.
Thank you very much for that. The first item on the agenda, second item on the agenda is the minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of November 2022. I am to propose the minutes and request a seconder if you're all in agreement. Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Posnett. The minutes will be confirmed as approved unless any member now wishes to raise any amendments. Thank you. Noted as approved. Declarations of interest. I invite members who wish to do so to make declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. No declarations of interest. I would like to now hand over to Rachel Ashley Corn, our Chief Internal Auditor, to provide an introduction to the Internal Audit Progress Report in our papers. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So the first paper that we have for you this evening is the latest update on the delivery of the Internal Audit Plan for the financial year. So in the usual format, so there's a copy of the full Internal Audit Plan on pages 19 and 20 of tonight's papers, and the latest status of each of those assignments as at the time of producing this report for the committee meeting. So since the last committee meeting, we have finalised a further 3 audit reports, which are summarised for you in section 2.5 of the report. And we remain on track for delivery. Indeed, we're slightly ahead really of where we would expect to be at this time of year in terms of the number of audits that have been completed. And we, as I say, we remain on track to complete these by the end of the financial year. So just running briefly through those audits which we have finalised since the last meeting to make members aware of the key findings. So within the first of those, the audit of business continuity management. So we were satisfied with the coverage in terms of the plans and the framework that's in place. We did identify some gaps in terms of some of the plans, which has all been noted, and that there's actions in place to address those. Those are subject to annual review. There's a good framework in place, but we would like to see some planned testing and some exercises scheduled in to make sure that we're happy that all of those plans remain fit for purpose. And we also need to ensure that all of our key contractors' business continuity plans are also held centrally. So just to expand on that slightly, we did pick some of the key contracts for the council and ones that really we would be concerned about if there was a business continuity issue. And we were satisfied that we were able to obtain copies of those plans. They were held, but they were just not held centrally with our other business continuity plans. So that's a recommendation going forward to make sure that's readily available in the case of an incident. So overall, we've given a satisfactory assurance opinion in relation to that audit, and there's obviously an action plan in place in relation to those areas. The second was in relation to the management of the housing revenue account. So this is one that we did discuss as part of audit planning last year with the committee to seek assurances around how the housing management account is managed in terms of the HRA business plan that's recently been adopted, but also how we're managing the risks around things like managing the accounting arrangements between the general fund and the HRA, making sure that we're managing those risks and say appropriately. So I'm pleased that we were able to give a high level of assurance on both the design and the compliance in these areas based on the overview that we've completed. It was notable that there had been significant improvements in how the HRA was being managed in recent years, and there'd been a lot of work invested in developing a good strategy and a data-driven, strategic, robust management arrangement, which was evident from the evidence that we saw. That's not to say there aren't risks, but there are certainly risks that remain and potential pressures as well. But obviously, we were satisfied that those risks were being identified, they were being actively identified and managed. And so that in terms of the framework for the management of the HRA, we were satisfied with those procedures. So we've given a good level of assurance overall on that one. And then the last was around the leisure health and leisure project. So in relation to this one, we wanted to review it because obviously it's a high profile, high value project for the council. We wanted to use this to get some assurance over the application of the council's project management framework, but also around compliance with the funding bodies requirements that were supporting this work in terms of the feasibility studies and looking into what's needed and what's feasible in terms of such a provision going forward. So obviously we've reported on that. We've looked at the key controls around project management, made sure that those are being applied, and we haven't highlighted any significant areas of concern there at all. So a good level of assurance based on the project as it stands at the moment in terms of its project management arrangements. Obviously, going on from here, that project has its own issues, and we'll need to look at those funding arrangements going forward. But in terms of how this stage as a project's being managed, we've given that good level of assurance. So we're also given an update in the report on the implementation of audit recommendations as usual. So Appendix 2 at page 23 of tonight's papers provides the latest update on those. So since the last committee meeting, we have marked 4 of the open actions as implemented. So those are now closed. And we do have a further 19 which remain overdue. As usual, we've provided full details for you of those which fall into the category of high priority and over 3 months overdue. So that's provided in Appendix 3. I do have some further updates on those housing related actions, so I'm happy to expand on that a little bit. Obviously, the first is an action that the committee have foreseen in previous progress reports that remains overdue. And this relates to a full service review of the intensive housing management service. So based on the latest update that I've had from officers, I understand that the service review is now going into it's been included in the service charge review, which has just been undertaken, which has been an extensive piece of work that's involved open meetings with tenants, and those meetings are due to conclude at the end of January. Following that stage, there will then be direct consultation with all of the recipients of the service, looking at how the service is going forward and making sure there's clear information provided. As we move forward from there will be a costed model with a clear service specification going forward, with the aim of having that in place in the next year. So we will obviously continue to review this, and we expect a further update at the next meeting. But hopefully that gives members a bit of an insight into the actions that are taking place in that area. So there will be a further update at the next meeting, but hopefully that review will be concluded by April 2023. So if that remains on track, we will obviously have that update for you at the March meeting. In terms of the housing repairs actions, again, these are 2 actions that you have seen before. So just to give you a further update on those, again, this relates to the implementation of a system upgrade, the Barra system as it's referred to. This is now aiming to go live before April. There's one IT issue that remains to be resolved to enable that to go live, but I understand discussions are currently underway to agree a fix to that system glitch. So hopefully in March we'll be able to provide you with an updated position on those actions as well. Just also to note, just before I conclude, Chair, that we've also looked into a potential amendment for the plan, which has been agreed by the Chair and the Section 151 officer outside of the meeting under the delegated powers, which relates to the climate change strategy audit, which was on the audit plan, which members will see on the plan on pages 19 and 20. So at the moment, we've obviously consulted with officers. We were due to make a start on this audit imminently. As we understand it, the climate change strategy hasn't actually in a position to be able to be audited at this stage. So we're expecting it to be completed in February and March, that ongoing work. As such, there's not really value in an audit at this time. So we're looking to defer that piece of work into the next financial year. We have looked at how we reallocate those days, and as I will mention in the next paper, we have been supporting Melton with doing in participating in a national pilot, which only a handful of authorities have been able to take part in, which has looked at housing tenancy fraud and making use of the latest data sets that are available to identify potential cases. So because of the work that we've delivered in supporting that, we would usually have to commission that and pay for that, charge it separately. But if we have got some contingency within the plan from the removal of the climate change strategy audit, we can reallocate those days accordingly. So that's what the amendment will be to that plan, which you'll see in the next committee paper. But as that has since been agreed, I wanted to make sure that that was communicated to the committee tonight. So that's a run through of the report, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Before that, before the debate, one thing we have to do, I need to invite a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation that the committee notes this report and the progress made by the internal audit team in the delivery of the internal audit plan. So if I can have a proposer, please. Thank you, Councillor Atherton. And who seconded it? Councillor Posnett. Thank you. Just a couple of things first. After the March meeting, there will only be 2 audits in progress to be reported at the first meeting in May or after the election, which is not unusual at all. And I checked at a meeting yesterday. They're not significant for any year-end action in the accounts department or internal audit. I would like to take the if we could take the reports first in the order that they came in terms of the debate. Business continuity management first, if you have any comments, councillors. Councillor Chandler.
Thank you. Halfway down page 15, it was found that 3 service area business continuity plans were not held centrally. Where are they held then if they're not held centrally?
The 2 were obtained directly. They were actually had two were obtained from the service leads, but I also noted, probably your second point, that 4 were not fully completed.
Yeah, I've highlighted it.
And that is in the recommendation. I've checked through the recommendations that they're making to improve the situation.
But where are they held? If they're not held centrally, where are they held? That's the question I'm asking. Is it that stupid, the question?
Through you, Chair. Sorry.
Yes, if you want to, Rachel. Yes, come in.
So just to confirm, so obviously there is a business continuity lead coordinating a lot of this activity that holds those plans centrally. When we asked for the full suite of them, we obviously noticed that there were some gaps in those services that didn't have those plans in place. We were able to obtain copies of plans from the service leads directly, but obviously in the case of an incident, they weren't all held by the coordinator and the lead. So the service leads had copies, but they weren't saved in that central repository. That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I've checked the schedule of recommendations, and the recommendations are by March 2023. So they're not long away dates. Anybody else on that particular report? Thank you. Management of the housing revenue account. Councillor Douglas.
Yes, Rachel mentioned the intensive housing service was coming under close scrutiny for the auditing. I was just really pleased to see that this is being undertaken, because I've had tenants stop me during the pandemic as I was in Melton during shutdown, asking me to look into this and to pass on concerns. They did feel it was unfair, and they couldn't work out why some flats and council properties were paying more than others. It was just a matter of making it transparent, clear, to work out what is being charged, really. And I'm sure that if it was just very clear for the tenants, so that they, they're given an amount, but they don't know why they're paying the amount. So if there's just some kind of extra work on that, so they can see exactly what they're being charged, and so they can compare it to other flats and houses under the council tenancies, and it's similar, and so that somebody's not paying a great deal more than another area. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that point was made regarding an outstanding recommendation. However, what not necessarily the report that so just to close that one, what I'm suggesting is, and obviously it's through the director, that we when we meet on, I think it's 28th of March, I think it's time we had either those recommendations implemented and a plain English answer as to where we are at the state of implementation with the relevant officer in attendance, I think, if that's okay with councillors on that one. Going back to the report, management of housing revenue account. Any comments on this one? I think what I would like to say is it's another well done, and we thank the office. We thank all involved regarding detailed audits at the last meeting. This is about, and if anybody can remember when we came in at the first audit committee in something like June 2019, and then later that year the chief executive wrote a paper about putting staff resources in, and then we recruited a dedicated manager with super experience who then left with his deputy, and another one, and then a change of lead counsellor on the cabinet and the appointment of a new director. I think we've come a long way. Again, like the last meeting, I think we've come a long way on this one. And for a small authority to be in this position going forward, I think it's credit to everybody involved on that one. The next one, project management, health and leisure wellbeing centre, phase 2. Councillor Chandler.
Thank you. I was a bit concerned to see that, or to read that no meetings had been held in June, July, September or October 2022, because although we've got no money, it's always been an ambition, I think, of the council to improve health and leisure well-being. Page 17.
Near the bottom.
Yes, yeah. When it said they were going to hold them more regularly, I thought they were going to make them weekly, but it wasn't. They're going to actually do the monthly ones that they hadn't been doing. And then there's the issue of a project manager going, I think, to 1 day a week. But there's a new target of completing this by the spring, And I think we possibly need to know where we are at this one, possibly an update at the March meeting. You know, I don't know whether it's scheduled for scrutiny, is it? In any time?
Yeah, I think there has been some involvement of scrutiny and some engaged. Yeah, okay. So I think it's probably going through that form, whereas this audit is not so much on the delivery of the projects, it's about the management of it. So, and I think it is fair to say in there, I mean, if you think about how much work went into that levelling up and a shared prosperity fund submission, that was the reason why it was delayed. And I think that came as well on the back as well of considerable work in that team on COVID business grants as well. But it's back on track now.
If scrutiny are going to be looking at the bigger picture of this, and we're on January. If scrutiny committee think it's necessary, they will put it on the agenda again before the election. Yeah, thank you very much, councillors. Thank you. Any other comments on the report, the progress report? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the fraud update report. Rachel Ashley Corn, Chief Internal Auditor, provide a brief introduction to the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report, as you say, is the 6-monthly counter fraud update. So this is just to keep members informed on the proactive and reactive and detective work that we do in relation to counter fraud. Given that we have a policy in place, we have a zero tolerance to fraud and corruption, and we need to do everything that we can to make best possible use of the tools available to us. So within the report, there's obviously an update on the work that we've been doing within the last 6 months. So that's included responding to referrals that we've received. We did publicise our report fraud reporting tool. We've updated the website, but we've also publicised it specifically during Fraud Awareness Week in November. Obviously we respond to any of the referrals that come through on that to make sure that we're looking into those appropriately. We've also completed the bribery risk assessment, which members of the committee are aware of and have seen copies of at a previous meeting. So there were some actions arising from that have identified some gaps and some areas for further improvement. We've also, as I mentioned earlier, participated in this housing fraud pilot. So the Cabinet Office facilitate the National Fraud Initiative, which is an exercise we have to take part in and we're mandatory participants in every 2 years. But in addition to that standard exercise, they also offer a range of other tools, and they also do the odd pilot as well, which they invite all local authorities to participate in, and a few are selected to take part. So one of the new areas that they wanted to develop their data sets in is in relation to tackling housing fraud. So any councils that have housing stock, making sure that we're on top of any potential flags of subletting or abandonment or misuse of council properties. So they're looking at different sources of data we can potentially use to identify this. So some of the data that they've got access to for this pilot relates to bank account records, for example, so financial data. So if an account is registered at a particular address, we're able to identify that, as well as things like credit reference agency details as well. So if people have applied for credit and used that address, again, that's something that we can pick up from that data as well. So we were lucky to be able to take part in this pilot. So it has involved some additional work. Obviously, we had to compile the data to submit it into that exercise. We have now received the matches and we are working through those with the housing team. As I've said within the report, that we actually received 235 matches in total. So obviously that takes some time to work through. We're looking at prioritising those really in relation to the type of matches. So for example, some of those relate to records where we have evidence that the named tenant has actually deceased. So we may have other people now living in the property or nobody linked to the property at all. So those are quite clear black and white cases where the housing officers are being able to go through and identify whether there's any evidence of fraud or just things that we've not been notified of in terms of change of circumstances. So we're working through those. We also then have a larger data set which relates to matches where the tenant appears to actually be linked to a property at another address. They may have moved out and we have other people living or matched to that property. So again, that could be a potential indicator of subletting. It may be nothing in it. There may, once we look into it, it might not be a fraud, but it gives us potential indicators that can target some of that counter fraud work. So I'm currently working through that at the moment, and I will be bringing an update to this committee in my next counter fraud update in terms of the outcomes of that exercise, and we'll obviously be reporting that back to the Cabinet Office as well. So I think that's quite an exciting piece of work, and it shows that we as a council are taking tenancy fraud very seriously and making use of any tools that we have at our disposal as well. So we're looking through those. As I said, we're monitoring the mailbox, and we've also, as I said, we have to take part in the 2-yearly NFI exercise. So the latest data uploads for that took place in September and November last year. So we've uploaded all of our data. We were well ahead of the deadlines, and we'll be receiving the outcomes of those in the next few months. So again, that will be some work for us to do around looking into those potential matches. So all in all, we're obviously looking at making sure we're on top of our fraud risks. We do also continue to monitor the fraud risk register and maintain that, and that will feed into the audit planning process for the development of the audit plan, which will obviously come to the March meeting as well. So I think that's a brief overview, Chair, but I'm happy to expand on anything further. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. First, before debate, I need to invite a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation that we note the latest counter fraud activity. Proposed, Councillor Webster, seconded, Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you. Put this out to debate. I think the first thing to say is I'm a veteran of this, and it's an intelligent way of doing things. And if at the end of the day we cleanse records but we don't have any frauds, it's actually a positive form of assurance by going through all this that we, that we're in good order. So it is a very good exercise, this one. So open to you, councillors. Councillor Douglas.
Yes, I thought this was a really interesting report, and I found myself asking lots of questions in my mind about it. For example, was it a piece of work recommended by the Cabinet's Office for Social Housing Fraud? And how long, if so, how long has it been running for? Is it the first year we've ever done it here? So I suppose there's 3 questions. One, is it mandatory? Have we had to do it? Is it recommended by central office? And how long has it been running for? And what did we do in the past? How did such things come to light? Because it is obviously very good, very efficient. Thank you.
Over to Rachel, but I think we're taking advantage of being invited in as a pilot, and Rachel will come in now.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to expand on that. So this is, as I said, this is a new data set. So this is the first time the Cabinet Office have ever used these particular data sets for this match. So it was a pilot to trial it out to see, is it worthwhile doing? And if it is, they may roll it out nationally. But at this stage, they reached out to all local authorities with housing stock and asked if anybody would like to participate. And we put our hand up and chose to take part because we wanted to do everything we can in terms of counter fraud. So we were lucky to be selected into that. So we're one of the first councils to have on the opportunity to trial this effectively. So if it does work, based on what we find, the Cabinet Office may want to make it mandatory for everybody, but for now it's something we've opted into out of choice.
Rachel, any more questions? No. So I think we can confirm that the committee have noted this report. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, number 6, housing benefit subsidy claim. Dawn Garton, Director for Corporate Services, will provide a brief introduction to the report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the report provides members with information on the outcome of the completed audit of the housing benefits subsidy claim for 2020-21 financial year, and the audit of the 21-22 claim has just commenced at this time. The outcome of the audit is an improvement in previous years in terms of the number and the level of errors identified. So we're on the right trajectory in terms of improvement in this area. Due to the level of transactions that you get anyway with benefit claims, it would be unrealistic to expect actually no errors to be found. And it's usual with this type of audit to at least find something. The ideal position would be to get to a position where we've reduced the extended 40+ testing, as that's significantly reduces both the resources that we have to dedicate to the audit, but also the cost of the audit itself as well, because that's an additional cost to carry that out. The other area picked up by the audit, and interestingly, it's the first time they've picked this up, relates to what's called our local scheme policy, which dates back, I can honestly say, some considerable years, and I can assure members was originally approved by council. It was just so long ago, and I do recall in previous years that we actually used to reaffirm this at council each year, because it was one of the areas that we potentially, the council, could have made savings if it was to adopt a different policy. And just for clarity, what the local scheme does is it disregards, when we're assessing claims, 100% of any war widows or widowers, war disablement scheme or armed forces compensation scheme payments when we're assessing any benefits. And I will include this just to tidy this up. It will be included in the reports going to council in February with the budget. And for members that have received the scrutiny papers, you'll see it in there, in those papers that have gone out yesterday, I believe, for the meeting next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. First of all, I need to invite a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation that the committee note the findings of the 2020-21 housing benefits audit and action being taken in response to the findings. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Posnett, and seconded by Councillor Chandler. I'll open the debate and invite members, if they wish to speak, to raise your hands if you've got any questions on this. Councillor Posnett.
No, I'd just like to say, I think it's very good. It's clear, explanatory, and being as they only made an error by £1 on one subsidy claim form, I don't think anybody can complain about that. I think it's a very clear, good report, understandable, well done. Thank you.
Key thing is that Dawn's saying is it's coming a long way over 3 years that we're getting better at what we do, and the loopholes and the performance has improved. Item 7, if we've noted that, urgent business. I'm not aware of any urgent business. So I will announce that the meeting is closed at 7 p.m.